there's got to be a certain tipping point. Once you hit a certain age, it's like if those cancers haven't begun forming yet, the telomeres can possibly limit how much they can grow. But then you also got to think about some cancers can actually get a mutated telomerase enzyme and they can actually add the telomeres back on. But I feel like most of these super sleepers you hear about, they're like functioning completely normal, just literally on 2 to 4 hours of sleep.
Tyler, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on again. Excited to dig in.
Yeah, a lot of people were very interested in our last episode where you shared about how genetics influences how people react to different supplements, popular supplements out there, and even like common foods. So I wanted to do a follow-up to discuss these things further. But before we scheduled it, we also agreed that we're going to talk about one particular study that came out recently, which was quite interesting. It was on the longest living woman at that time, and she passed away, and they did a study on her before she passed away at the age of 117. So there was quite interesting findings from that study that they discovered about her genetics. So we'll discuss a little bit about it. So what was your overall impression of that particular study?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. I think it first makes sense to kind of touch on the whole, multi-omics aspect of it, right? So for you listening that aren't aware, omics are studies of different, I guess we could call them layers, right, of biology, genomics or genetics, right? That's what I'm a specialist in, but I'll be the first to admit, as much as I love it, right, it's just one piece of the puzzle, right? We have things like transcriptomics or epigenetics, which can see, how much of these genes are you making, but we know we turn genes into proteins. So there's proteomics, what type of proteins are actually being made. There's things like even exposomics, right? That was the one they actually didn't do in that study, where it's really focusing on different environmental exposures and things. So it's really layering on all of these. I like to think of them as chapters of a book, right, that layer on top of each other. It was pretty interesting how she wasn't universally young all around with all these different measurements, right? It's kind of the overall net effect of these individually smaller parts.
Yeah, that she had some good genetics, or the genes that are associated with longevity, but she also had some genes that were associated with shorter longevity and increased cancer, but she still lived a very long time.
Yep.
So there's, because in a lot of these cases, it's also luck, where you're born, what kind of environment you're in, and, whether you get hit by a car or something like that. There's a lot of luck as well.
Well, I wonder how many centenarians, right, like super longevity people, end up having their life cut short exactly due to the bad luck, right? Like how many do we lose to car accidents that could otherwise be in that discussion?
Yeah. But one of the biggest surprising things, I think, in the study was telomeres. So she actually had short telomeres, which, telomeres are thought to be, I guess, markers of longevity, that you need to have long telomeres to live longer, etc. But she actually had quite short telomeres. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think of it in terms of, we think of it in terms of, regular aging, right? Like the little, the ticking time bombs, right? Like the fuse for our cells. Each replication gets a little shorter and shorter, but we also need to think about in the context of someone that's a lot older, right? We need to think in terms of cancer, right? So as these telomeres are really eroded, the cells at that point aren't going to be replicating too much, but that can also apply to cancer cells themselves, right? So the things that may have made her seem not as longevity centric, right, for the telomeres could be the same thing that starve off cancer. I feel like there's got to be a certain tipping point, right? Once you hit a certain age, it's like if those cancers haven't begun forming yet, the telomeres can possibly limit how much they can grow. But then you also got to think about some cancers can actually get a mutated telomerase enzyme, and they can actually add the telomeres back on, right? So going back to the luck thing, it's like perhaps maybe the mutations that she acquired, right? We're all acquiring mutations and, you could say forming little cancers, right, all the time. But if they didn't add on that telomerase, right, they're not going to be able to grow that much, because just like the healthy cells in the body, that fuse is very, very short and eroded.
Mm. Yeah, that was one of the theories that why did she didn't, or she had actually other genes that increased her risk of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So the short telomeres might have been, yeah, like a adaptive, or like it turned out in her favor in that case, that she had some genes that increased risk of cancer, but the shorter telomeres prevented her from getting the cancer, which, yeah, is kind of that's a good luck example that she actually had multiple of these different genes, one of them being negative, but the other ones counteracted those negative genes.
Yeah, there were, some really interesting mutations that they kind of specifically mentioned, right? I thought it was interesting that there were some linked to cell adhesion molecules. I think there was this one's the Down syndrome cell adhesion molecule. I'm pretty sure that's the name of that one. I'm trying to recall the other ones. There were two that were for cell adhesion molecules, and you may think, right, well, if there's a protein that makes cells attached to each other, why would that be linked to longevity, right? But normally it's thought about like connective tissue, right? It's also important for brain function. But immune cells, in order for immune cells to be activated, they need to actually link up to each other and form what's called an immunological synapse. This is how we prime our immune system. And if you don't prime your immune system, I like to give the example of, it's like, they have those like cold case murder shows where it's like they need to find the body. They give the bloodhound, right, a piece of clothing and goes and find it. That's how I like to describe antigen presentation, right? In order for your immune system to go and attack a cancer, right, and destroy the cancer so it doesn't keep growing, you need to get a piece of that cancer, show it to your immune system, they sniff it, then they all get primed, in the lymph nodes, and then they're all exiting the lymph nodes and they could detect that cancer. So these cell adhesion molecules are actually what enable the immune cells to attach to each other in order to literally share that piece of clothing, right? So it's thought that that was a way that also made her immune system hyper functioning, right? But not too much, right? Because then we get autoimmunity, right? But we want to make sure we don't have that deficit there. So that was something else that I thought was pretty interesting. And then too, like the connection with mTOR that was there. mTOR activation, that's what we want when we're trying to, get big and build muscle, but it's that balancing act, right? Like being too big evolutionarily, like isn't great. But one of the MAP kinases that she had, the MAPK mutations he had, that's one of the actual signaling molecules down into mTOR. So that may have been one of the reasons why as well, mTOR is like down here on the cell signaling, but up here you have that MAP kinase that signals to it. So if that doesn't work as well, in theory, it may have made anabolism a bit more difficult, but at the same point, that can be pretty protective for longevity as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the immune system. So there are some of these certain genes as well associated with longevity that strengthen the immune system and I guess like overall resilience. So, some of them being FOXO3 and others. So I guess the question is, does having a strong immune system then, could it be like one of the, let's say advantages for overall longevity?
Yeah, definitely. And the FOXO3, that's when we have cell signaling, you have the surface of the cell, you have something that binds to it with a receptor, then you have those secondary messengers, right, like the MAP kinases. And then at the end, right, how do the cells actually change their behavior? It's through these transcription factors. Those are what actually make different genes, make different proteins to change the cell behavior. And that's exactly what FOXO3 is. So it's one of those transcription factors. And what's interesting too is that actually also plays a role in mTOR as well. So you have IGF-1 signaling can kind of drive with they oppose each other, right? Because too much of that anabolism, IGF-1, growth factors, growth hormone, can activate that. That can turn off the FOXO3, turn off some of these longevity genes and activate mTOR. So it's kind of that tipping point there, right? Yeah, the FOXO3, that's probably the most well-studied variant for the longevity there. And she had some of those mutations there, and it's like I feel like people think that these longevity genes just make you, immortal, right? But it's like
Yeah.
you could absolutely have those FOXO3 mutations that, let me put it this way. I've worked with people that, they don't seem to be these super graceful ages, and they have the FOXO3, right? Just confirming as well, there's no one single longevity gene that guarantees these things, right? Also, where she was living, the food she was having, all these other things definitely play a role. The IGF-1 stuff is really interesting because we have, when that, even on the receptor level, right? Whether it's the receptor itself or the transcription factor, we want to think in terms of that whole signaling pathway. So if it's hyperfunctioning, that IGF-1, that's linked to things like acromegaly. It could be linked to premature death, and you can kind of somewhat compare it to, growth hormone abuse, right? And professional bodybuilding as well, linked to shorter lifespan. But if it's not as active, I guess my point is whether you have a hypofunctioning or less sensitive IGF-1 receptor, or you have an overactive FOXO3 transcription factor, they're essentially doing the same thing, right? Because it's the same pathway. But this is where, genetics moving from the laundry list of individual mutations to assemble in terms of a pathway, right? Because what if you have the less functioning IGF-1 receptor, you have the better functioning MAP kinase that I mentioned for mTOR, and you also have the extra active FOXO3. That's 3 different points in the same pathway that are all shifting heavily towards that longevity side.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Personally, so I don't know if it's genetic, but I have like very low IGF-1 levels always. They're always like 100 or below 100. It might be because of doing a lot of intermittent fasting. So that might explain it. I'm not eating like a low protein or low carb diet, so those things.
What's your normal schedule? Are you doing that like daily or a couple days a week, like extended fast?
No, I do daily. This let's say 16 and 8 or 1 meal a day type of thing. But I'm eating, plenty of protein and plenty of carbs and calories as well, so I'm not really restricted. So the only thing that could explain the low IGF-1 is either genetics or the intermittent fasting window. But I build muscle quite easily, given that I do like 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day. I have like decent muscle mass. And I do think that I have also like a strong immune system. Like I'm never like really sick. I've lived in a molded house for 2 decades and never got sick.
That's the real test right there. Wow.
Yeah, like I never got sick. So you mentioning these 3 is actually exactly describing me. Which again, but at the same time, I have like no one in my family who has lived a long time. Like no one in my family, like grandparents and etc., has lived to over the age of 80. So they all like have died in their 70s. But I do have like this kind of interesting trifecta of longevity factors that might be beneficial. But like you said, it's not just these genes. There's multiple factors, the environment. Yeah. There's thousands of other genes that I might have that are harmful and might also be beneficial.
That's where it gets really overwhelming at times.
I want to take a quick break to let you know about my favorite wellness devices, which are the bond charge red light therapy devices. You've probably seen many of your favorite longevity influencers using these red light therapy devices, but do they actually work? Yes, they do. Red light therapy has been shown to have many benefits on skin anti-aging, hormone optimization, pain management, and even exercise performance. I use my device every day for 15 minutes, especially during the winter months when there's not much sunlight. It increases my energy in the morning and makes my skin glow. Just check out the testimonials on the Bond Charge website for the before and after pictures of other people. Most red light therapy devices don't have the right wavelengths of light, which might mean you're not getting the claimed benefits. Bond Charge uses the exact wavelengths of light used in research, and they also have near-infrared light that's beneficial to the joints. Head over to bondcharge.com and use the code SIIM, S-I-I-M, for a 15% discount.
The receptor mutations, those are personally my favorite types of mutations because they fundamentally change how you interpret labs, right? How you interpret blood work, right? Because, I wonder if too, the fasting definitely could play a role in the lower circulating IGF-1, right? But I also wonder too, just speculating here, if you have let's just say you have a hypersensitive IGF-1, right? I wonder if there could be feedback loops, right? Or even same thing if it was an androgen receptor, right? If your androgen receptor is hypersensitive, I wonder if there could be possible feedback loops for certain individuals where your body is so much more sensitive to IGF-1 that your body has the feedback loop and says, whoa, that's enough IGF-1 signaling. We could either downregulate the receptor possibly, or maybe lower the amount we're being producing. I would think it would probably be more so a receptor thing, but just trying to spitball here ideas for the lower IGF-1 there.
Yeah, I might have like higher androgen receptor density. I would suspect that.
Do you know if you have, so the androgen receptors can have CAG repeats, so that can like increase the sensitivity of them. Do you know if you have any of those in the androgen receptor?
I haven't specifically looked for it.
Got it.
But yeah, I can maybe look it later.
Yeah, those are the, I feel like everyone has that one friend that from like, middle school, right? They would kind of like eat whatever and just be, super built. So when you were younger, were you like prior to consistent weight training, were you kind of already like higher muscularity, or more so were you not so much that, but you were a hyper responder to the training, or more so normal response rates, just doing the right things for long periods of time?
Yeah, well, before I started lifting, I was like a bit skinnier, but when I did start to lift weights, I built muscle quite easily. So I've always like had easy time building muscle fast. So like I just eat more and just try to get stronger, and I build muscle quite easily. But I started off like from a skinnier side of things.
Got it.
When I was
on the opposite. I was fat growing up. I was the endomorph on the other side of things. So I got to like for you, well, you're doing the fasting, so it's probably pretty difficult for you doing one meal a day to get too much in a surplus, right? That's probably difficult even just fitting that in your stomach to actually.
Right.
But like when you do a bulk, you're not doing one meal a day, right? That's probably more maintenance for you, or a cut.
Well, if I do a bulk, I would do a similar thing. Maybe I would add like some fruit or some more protein before, but so it's not a specific 1 meal a day. It's I have like a protein shake in the morning. Yeah,
got it. Okay.
Yeah, like 1.5. So, but if I were to bulk, then I would still like eat in the evening mostly. But yeah, what about you? Like, you have looked at yours probably quite thoroughly, your own genes? Do you have like any good longevity genes?
Yeah, so I have one copy of the FOXO3 gene, and now the FOXO1 can help or hinder with insulin sensitivity. So that can could be linked to insulin resistance. I have some of that there. So just me for myself, I've never been someone doing super. I've always been more of a moderate carb. I just notice if I'm really doing any more. I mean, I'm 6'3", like 230 right now. Probably around, I don't know, probably 13% or so body fat. But I'm doing maybe 200 grams a day. If I try to I hear people around my size, doing 400, 500, 600 grams. I notice pretty quickly, like kind of like overspilling, right? It's not really getting partitioned very well. And then it's like, oh, well, you have all this glucose disposal agents, right? These sensitizing supplements, your berberine, your cinnamon, your fenugreek, but all of those are MAO inhibitors. So as we talked about in the past, I'm really sensitive to those things, right? I have a slow MAO gene. So a lot of these supplements that a lot of the fitness people say, they help with nutrient partitioning, which they do. I've tried them. I notice I'm a lot more revved up, right? Or energized. So I need to be very, very, very careful when I'm utilizing those, right? A little too much methylated B vitamins or B vitamins with some of those, I notice I'm just overly wired. So it's for a really sensitive person. Sometimes it could be tough to get a lot of these proper nutrients in that people use, because the limiting factor a lot can be, the catecholamines and the overall nervous system stimulation.
So FOXO3 is essentially increases stress resilience. And there are certain activities as well that increase FOXO3 expression, like fasting and exercise and cold exposure, etc. So would it be then that people with higher FOXO3 expression, would they be, I guess, more suitable to do those things like cold baths, and people who have lower FOXO3 genetically, would it actually be harmful to them because their body is less resilient against the stress, or is it something that you can just adapt to if you do things that increase FOXO3?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that most of these mutations have to do with the FOXO3 binding capability to the DNA. So I'm pretty certain it's that, not so much that you have higher baseline expression, right?
Okay.
So if it binds more tightly and can transcribe these genes better, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I would think of it as. I would think that perhaps the people that don't have it, that don't have the higher binding, they may be more. It might be more beneficial. They're going to be restoring a deficit, if that makes sense, right? So utilizing the cold exposure, the fasting of these things can help bring that up more. But the people that already have the better functioning, right, the higher binding capability to the DNA, yeah, I wonder if you could push it too far too, right? Because it's like, who benefits more? Someone that is already high and is going to go even higher and higher peak transcription, right? Higher peak levels, or the person that's lower than normal, and we want to bring them up to a normal level at least, right? So it's difficult to say. It kind of depends how you look at it, right? Do you want to just be already set longevity-wise and just become a super soldier, right? Or do you look at the people that say, wow, you really need this just to be normal? Of course, it's just one gene, right? But yeah, interesting question. Hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, you can make an argument of both ways that people who are with higher FOXO3, they're just gonna get all the benefits from cold exposure and avoid all the side effects because they have higher resilience. But yeah, people who have lower FOXO3, if they do their cold baths, then they get some also benefits. They might need to be more careful with not overdoing it. I guess just they might be able to tolerate less a little bit.
Yeah, because other factors come into play too, right? Like at least with the cold plunging, right? Cold exposure. You also have things you got to think about, like the UCP1 gene. That can actually be linked to people having a harder time losing fat from cold exposure. So that's one thing, a caveat to take into consideration. But a gene I've been looking more into, I actually found out it's highly mutated for myself, and kind of finding that out, I've actually been doing a lot more cold showers in the morning. The DBH gene. So this is the gene that actually converts dopamine into norepinephrine. So this gene, there's several mutations studied in humans that can lower its functionality. So this can mean higher dopamine levels, lower norepinephrine or noradrenaline levels. So this can be linked to impulsivity, ADHD, just generally poor focusing overall. And I myself, I can be impulsive at times, like, oh, that's interesting, let's just go check that out. And it kind of ties into ADHD when people think it's all about, I have low dopamine. But we need to think of each individual. For a lot of people with ADHD, you may actually have high dopamine, but you have low noradrenaline. So it's like, I like to think of it as dopamine is what drives initial interest in something, right? Oh, I want to start this project. I want to sit down and start this work. But it's the norepinephrine. That's what really keeps you locked in. Like that's what nicotine stimulates the release of, right? Nicotine doesn't really affect dopamine at all, but it can be great for focusing for people, right? Because it raises the more deep focus there. So people talk about cold exposure, how it, they compare it to cocaine, right? How it jacks up dopamine, how it's, it's like taking your Adderall every morning, this or that, right? But dopamine goes up, I think 200 or 300%. Norepinephrine goes up 500 to 700% from cold exposure. So if we're really thinking about what really drives most of the cognitive focusing benefits of cold exposure, I would make an argument. I think norepinephrine is actually the main player, not so much the dopamine. So if you have people, I have several mutations in that gene. So I already have lower norepinephrine production. So when I do the cold exposure, this is what I speculate, right? There's no studies showing, this would be a cool study, right? People doing cold exposure, they can do a cognitive task and focusing task, right? With and without this genetic mutation to really see, does that help restore the deficit better, right? I notice it helps me immensely, right? But again, kind of speculative there. But I've seen for people that I work with that there's a high correlation with ADHD there, or poor focusing. So I will, I mean, not prescribe, right? But recommend, right? Even if it's a quick 2-minute cold shower, right? Just start somewhere. And these are people that I've seen that in my clinical experience respond better to the cold exposure therapy. So it's like the FOXO3, then there's also the UCP1 gene. I mean, some people can get a little overstimulated doing the cold exposure, especially later in the day. So there's that aspect. But then also how much, noradrenaline, norepinephrine are you making as well?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. FOXO3 is one of the, like you said, one of the most known longevity genes. And there was a recent study on monkeys in China where they did stem cell therapy, and they gene edited some FOXO mutations. So they resulted in higher FOXO3 expression from the stem cell therapy in the monkeys. And the monkeys had, I mean, I think the results weren't like that impressive. They, did see a decrease in these biological age clocks, but it's not a very significant result. And some of the organ function also improved, but not in all organs. I think like 54% of the organs improved.
So just so I understand, so you said they gene edited. So they edited the host monkey like systemically, like as an embryo.
No, they had human stem cells, and they gene edited those.
I see.
To do some mutations on the FOXO3 that it reduced the breakdown of FOXO3 or something like that.
Do you know, were they introducing a novel type of mutation, or did they induce a mutation that humans normally have?
I exactly don't remember that one, but
yeah, because then I'm wondering too, like the stem cells they got from the humans.
Yeah,
were those humans have beneficial FOXO3 genetics to begin with, right? Like. Mm-hmm. Like I wonder if you took the stem cells from that 117-year-old woman, right? If they took those stem cells versus someone else's stem cells, right? Like, I guess my point is, it's like if here's a line of, the maximal FOXO3 optimization genetics for a human being, were those stem cells just brought up to that, or were they like, they did some mutation that may not even be super healthy to have in a human, but it just really blew that FOXO3 out of the water?
Yeah, well, the other monkey group got regular human stem cells, and they saw some improvement in organ function, but they had like a lower result. So the gene editing did have some unique effect.
Yeah, from the same pool. So some were unedited, some were.
Yeah.
And then interesting. That's
so
cool.
There were some additional effects from the gene editing. But yeah, I mean, my question is going to be that, do you think that FOXO3 gene editing, will it become like more popular in the future? Because it's one of the most known ones.
It's tough, I did CRISPR in my PhD with breast cancer cells, and I remember doing it. I validated all of the primers needed to cut out, the one specific gene, did all the validation of the cells, and the target gene was gone, but then noticed there was, off-target effects as well, right? And it's, again, I was a scientist in training, right? So like, did I mess something up? Perhaps. But the thing with gene editing for me is I feel like we can't be as certain as some people make it to believe that those molecular scissors aren't cutting anywhere else, right? Like you check the whole DNA for that. That'd be tricky, right? Because then it's like with the gene editing, right? They're helping deafness, all these actual, I'm trying to kind of word this, these real clinical diseases that are actually ruining people's health versus, where do you draw the line with eugenics, right? Because if you're going to be jacking up your FOXO3, right, like that's where it's like, I'm trying to think, would they be utilizing that for disease prevention? Interesting. Yeah, the gene therapy stuff, it's It's interesting, right? It's also scary at the same point, right? Because it's
Right.
also we need to think about when are we doing the gene editing, right? Are we doing the gene editing pre-fertilization in the egg and sperm? Are we doing them with the embryo, before they're an adult? Because the earlier you do it, if those mutations that you're changing, if they end up getting produced in the gametes, right, the sex cells, those also get passed down, generations. I don't know. You probably heard about a couple of years ago. They did I think there were twins in China where they did the gene editing,
Right.
and they made them, immune to HIV. And then they said, "Oh, we actually found out too that these kids are like super smart, super smart." And in my head, I'm like, this is actually around the time when I was doing the CRISPR in my PhD. And I was like, with all the validation I was doing to make sure we're targeting the right gene, in my head, I'm like, there is no freaking way. These very intelligent Chinese scientists, they knew they were going to make those kids super intelligent. They just kind of, I think, proposed it initially as a noble cause. We're helping HIV, right? You see what I'm saying? It's like the Trojan horses, we're going to fix a disease, but in reality, we're also making super babies, right? So it's interesting. You affect an HIV gene, but that's also expressed in the brains and makes them a lot smarter. And then what? I think the main investigators, they just disappear. I don't think anyone's found them yet. I think they did it off the record, right? It wasn't even properly funded. It was kind of like underground. They just did it, presented it, and then just disappeared.
Yeah, well, the guy is he went to jail, but he's out now, and he's on.
Oh, he went to jail. Okay.
He's on X now. He's like posting like very
philosophical. Okay, I didn't follow up with that. Okay. Have you heard any more? Have you heard other updates? I mean, the twins should probably be probably like 6+ years old now at this point.
I haven't paid attention to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's on X, and he's posting like some kind of philosophical posts as well. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. And another question I had in this context would be the telomerase. So you mentioned that it can be harmful in terms of cancer. And in the last podcast, we discussed all these supplements that are harmful for some people because of genetics. Would then let's say, because in longevity space, there's also like the misconception that you want to have longer telomeres and you take telomerase boosters, these kind of telomerase activator supplements. So would then for some people, it's not going to be a good idea due to genetics.
So you're saying, you're saying in regards to cancer?
Yeah. So the old woman, she probably was saved thanks to her telomeres.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because something that we do need to think about that I think a lot of people in the supplement space don't talk about much, right, is if there are existing cancers in the body, right, that are also going to be absorbing these nutrients, right? I remember there was a study, I think it was with glutathione. I'm trying to remember if it was in vivo or an organoid study, but basically suggesting that could potentially, promote cancer growth, right? Because these cancer cells are mostly our cells that are mutated in certain ways. And could some of these mutations make them, I guess we'll use the word hungrier, right, for certain nutrients, right? So it's something to really consider, but like, what does that mean? Like, how far do you take that? Anyone, before they take any natural supplement, they need a full body MRI, right, to check for cancers, right? But even at that point, it's like you need a reasonably sized tumor to even pick that up on, a full body MRI as well. So, yeah, I think it'd be interesting to read more into.
But from a gene test, let's say someone does their gene test and they see they have like genetically higher risk of cancer and their family members also died to cancer. So for them, probably maybe taking a telomerase activator is not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, hard to say that definitively, right? I know we can see genetically if someone is prone to shorter telomeres for sure. I'm trying to think if we have rigorous data for longer telomeres. I know definitely for shorter. It's tough, right? Because it's like, do you want your cells to be lasting longer? It also comes into the immune activation, right? All these other factors as well, because theory, if the immune system is going to be actually going and detecting these cancers, then the increased telomerase may not matter as much, but it's an arms race, right? Cancers are always trying to evolve and evade. It's an arms race going back and forth, right? So hard to say, because I mean, a lot of these telomerase, like vitamin E does it, vitamin D does it. Like a lot of these, we're not talking necessarily about super niche, hardcore underground biohacker peptides, this and that, right?
Right.
A lot of these general supplements that the majority of people take technically lengthen telomeres, but it all depends on where you draw the line, because a lot of it's mechanistic right now. And with that logic, it's like, okay, so I'm never going to take any vitamin D. Well, low vitamin D is linked to cancers too.
Mhm.
So, we need to try to figure out, I'd always tell people we're all chasing the perfect protocol, health optimization, but there's really no such thing as the perfect protocol, because there's always going to be some potential caveats, mechanistic things that could play a factor, or maybe it doesn't play a factor, or maybe it plays more of a factor than you'll ever understand. So it's tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, if there was a gene therapy for telomeres that you know that, okay, it's going to make your telomeres longer.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And it's, safe. Personally, I wouldn't probably take it.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, even
Yeah,
because
I mean,
I don't think even if it was safe, I wouldn't take it just from the understanding of the biology of aging. That is my understanding of it. That telomeres aren't that big of a role or big of a deal in terms of lifespan, in my opinion. It's more about the short. Maybe if you see that, okay, your telomeres are getting super short, then you can maybe short-term therapy to get them back to a normal scale. But I guess hyper long telomeres are definitely not a good idea.
Yeah, because we also got to think too, what's actually happening when the telomeres run out, right? We're releasing a lot of this, senescent secretome, this inflammatory secretome. But again, going back to, if your immune system is more wired for anti-inflammatory states, right? Even though the super centenarian, right? I don't see why she wouldn't have been releasing some of this senescent secretome, right? But again, if the immune system itself isn't going to be reacting so excessively, then it may not really matter quite as much. And, how would they determine a telomerase gene therapy is safe, right?
Right.
I would want to see, we would need to test that. I would need to see that everyone's screened for circulating tumor cells. We would need to validate that the people getting this do not have any detectable cancer, right? I mean, I'm with you. I wouldn't be taking it either. But for the people that would think about it, it's you really need to make sure that there's, with as much as technology can prove, there is an existing cancer, right? Because it's maybe they could do it in mice and also see, right? If you do, or monkeys, if you do actually have existing cancers and then you get that gene therapy, what happens then versus if you don't have existing cancer? That'd be a really cool study. But the longevity stuff, man, you really can be playing with fire.
Yeah. You pull one lever and then another lever pops out somewhere else.
And we don't even know what most of the levers are at this point either, right? We know. Yeah. I think there's so much more that we don't know than we do know about health and science. And I think it's going to be that way for a very long time. I mean, AI is going to help close that gap faster than we thought, right? But
yeah. What about IGF-1? So low IGF-1R is associated with longevity as well. If you could dim down your IGF-1 a little bit, maybe not completely turn it off, but reduce some of the expression, would you do that kind of a gene therapy?
I feel like it might depend how much it would affect, my ability to train and build muscle. I love hitting the weights hard, right? I like having the ability to gain muscle if I want to lose a little bit, this and that, right? So I think I don't know if I would do a gene therapy, right? Even a lot of these cancer vaccines that are coming out, and a lot of them aren't even mRNA mediated, right? So it's other mechanisms. It's because what if you're wrong, or what if the science is wrong in your specific scenario, right? I think that's for me where I draw the line. And I think, it's not biologic, but even with all the Neuralink stuff, right? as much as it would infinitely fold increase, your work output and stuff, it's like that's really weird, right?
Yeah.
Would you get the Neuralink?
Probably not like an implant,
Yeah.
but glasses or something like a
Yeah, a wearable you could turn off, right? That'd be great.
the monocle, or what's the the one eye glass or something like that. Those initially I would use those.
They have a that reminds me of you see Dragon Ball Z? Like they have the little like scouter thingy. That's what that reminds you of, the monocle. I know they had a monocle one. That'd be pretty funny looking.
Yeah, or contact lenses or something like that. That's I think very feasible. But in a lot of these like longevity clinics, you see growth hormone therapy and stuff like that. But high growth hormone might have like negative effects on longevity.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that why do they actually prescribe it in those clinics?
Yeah, and I think too, it's again, we do know there's people that are prone to lower growth hormone, right? So this is also why I think it's important, you can check the circulating growth hormone levels, but I think it's also important to see the synthesis of the growth hormone, those genes involved, the receptor sensitivity. I think it's really important to weed out, like it reminds me, like when I work with people with hormones, right? Like we can see, do you have a harder time making pregnenolone, making DHEA, making testosterone, right? So when someone comes to me with low testosterone hormone issues, I'm not against hormone therapy by any stretch, but for a lot of people, most people with hormone issues, it's lifestyle related, right? It's the microplastics, it's the poor sleep, it's the junk food, it's the stress in your life. So it's like, I would rather, could you just go on testosterone and feel better? Sure. But for a lot of people that go on these hormone therapies that are kind of using it as a Band-Aid, it stops working as much after a while, right? There's these feedback loops. So, if we can figure out let's say if someone has a harder time making DHEA, right? And it's not just based on one mutation, right? The polygenic scoring I use does 48,000 SNPs for DHEA production, right? So that's something I see be really accurate with blood work. Is your testosterone here lower because you can't make the ingredient as well? So if you can't make the ingredient as well, I would rather have you try, we'll check the blood work, right? And a lot of times it correlates. I would rather have you try that, the actual missing piece for you, and then it could flow through into the testosterone. But if you're somebody that literally can't synthesize testosterone from DHEA as well, that's an individual I'll say, hey, we could try to work on all these other things, but I do think testosterone replacement therapy, you're an ideal candidate because it's actually a true genetic suppression. So take that over to the growth hormone, right? It's kind of the same thing there, how my brain is looking at that, right? If it's a true genetic suppression, or the same thing can be true with the DIO enzymes. So DIO 1 and 2, these are what convert and activate thyroid hormone in the body. So those two isoforms, if those are mutated, highly mutated in people, a lot of times they have thyroid issues. And similar lines, I'll say, hey, even if, let's say they have Hashimoto's, a lot of inflammation going on, even in a perfect world, if there was no autoimmunity, no inflammation, your thyroid will very likely always struggle to activate enough. So for you, don't beat yourself up if you need a low dose of thyroid hormone, because it's literally a true genetic suppression, right? So that's kind of how I view a lot of these therapies. You want to really tease out, is it something that you can do lifestyle-wise or all these other factors first? Or you could identify right away up front with the genetic testing, wow, okay, I'm going to work on all my lifestyle to get my testosterone better, but I'm going to understand that I may not be able to get over a 500 for testosterone, right? Even doing a lot of the right things.
Yeah. Obviously, it has some use cases. I think they medically use it for people who have like children who are like stunted in growth, like Messi. I think he got growth hormone when he was young.
And some of those individuals, they actually can have a lot more severe pathogenic or clinically relevant mutations, right? So like the genes I focus on, they're not like gonna completely ruin your life, right? But some of these other more severe variants, right? You and I, or people listening right now, can have mutations for lower growth hormone. But those types of cases, not all of them, but those more clinical cases, they have more severe mutations that are a lot rarer, where they really, like, their growth is literally like stunted, right? So it makes sense to utilize that.
Yeah.
And who was that you said had that?
Messi, the soccer
Got it.
player. Yeah, and the low IGF-1 and low growth hormone. So these people with a Laron syndrome, they have like extremely low rates of cancer and diabetes. So they're very short in terms of height, and they have extremely low rates of these cancer, because IGF-1 is gonna it's involved in cancer growth as well, but obviously it's not the only thing it does. But just because these people have extremely low IGF-1 and extremely low growth hormone from birth, then they rarely die to cancer or diabetes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, going back to like what responds better to the IGF-1, right? Like the cancer cell or the healthy cell, right? I think we're also got to wonder too, right? These mutations, these random mutations that cancer cells gain, what if that makes your hypofunctioning IGF-1 receptor hyperfunctioning, right? So what if you could kind of flip that, and now all that hormone is doing that, right? So interesting rabbit hole.
Yeah, and you can use, I guess, nutrient partitioning, or in this context, it would be like hormone partitioning. That if you lift weights, then you're more likely to use that IGF-1 for muscle growth rather than cancer growth. Because if you eat the standard American diet, you have high IGF-1, you're not exercising, then you're probably like promoting cancer with that lifestyle and that like form of physical activity. But if you're doing resistance training, then at least you're building muscle. And interestingly, bodybuilders don't really die to cancer. They die to heart disease a lot, but cancer is not that common in that sport. Although they're abusing.
Too, because I think a lot of times too, I feel like a lot of them can sadly pass like 30s, 40s, early 50s, right?
Right.
I wonder if they were able to live long. Like, I wonder if part of that could be a survivorship thing, right? Where maybe they're just not living long enough for it to really ramp up, right? Where the heart's kind of giving out earlier. Interesting.
Well, I would imagine cancer could, develop much faster, because in the general population,
That's true. Yeah.
You don't really see heart disease in people who are 20 or 30 years old.
Yeah.
You do see cancer in even younger people. So, it's kind of interesting that bodybuilders. I mean, they speed on heart disease.
Again, like you just mentioned before, maybe that could be due to what are they doing a lot of intense exercise, right? So as you mentioned, maybe it could be partitioning. Interesting, because what you mentioned before was interesting. So the exercise you think could be partitioning that IGF-1. Is that because the skeletal muscle, it upregulates the IGF-1 receptors, so it's just kind of, there's more of the ligand binding to the muscle cells versus potential cancer cells?
Yeah, and that's how I would think about it. That mTOR as well. You can use mTOR for muscle growth or cancer growth, but if you are lifting weights, then you're triggering mTOR expression in the muscles mostly. So you're, I guess, reducing the likelihood of the mTOR being or going towards cancer. But because if you're, let's say, on a standard American diet, you do have high IGF-1 levels as well. At least I would imagine, most cases. But
and is that just from the surplus, or is just from the actual the processed foods themselves?
Probably like all of those things. Yeah, just eating too much processed foods, sugary foods, etc. So at least that's my theory. One thing that would be interesting to talk about is sleep. So some people genetically sleep shorter. I'm not aware if those people have shorter lifespan as well because of that, or do they live like normally? Is it that their body is so resilient that they need less sleep and they can get away with less sleep? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I do know that orexin signaling can play a role in that. So orexin's a really interesting signaling pathway. People think, like adrenaline or dopamine or even histamine, right, can promote wakefulness. But orexin signaling is what really drives that real wakefulness type feeling. So I know mutations that make lower orexin signaling are linked to narcolepsy, right? So orexin signaling, I believe, has been linked to, I guess, those super sleepers, right? Trying to remember off the top of my head. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Are they literally just, they can't sleep as long, or are they actually protected against, whether it's the oxidative stress or these, negative effects of the sleep itself? Like, are they kind of bundled up in one thing is what you're asking, kind of, right? So that's a really cool question. Yeah. Are there some people that are super sleepers that aren't as protected against those negative effects? And then there are some people that are super sleepers that are more protected, right? Then I would guess that they probably can't sleep long, but they feel like crap all the time. But I feel like most of these super sleepers you hear about, they're like functioning completely normal, just literally on 2 to 4 hours of sleep. So I would lean probably towards they're probably mutually inclusive there, having those. I can't remember off the top of my head which specific genes have been linked to that. I know there's been some kind of like that MAP kinase, like secondary messengers, right? But sometimes those can be hard to kind of find a clear aha, that's exactly why that makes sense, because a lot of these secondary messengers can be involved in multiple pathways.
Yeah. The perfect combo would be that you have the short sleep genes, plus then you maybe have like some higher FOXO3 that you augment yourself against the shorter sleep. You get away with less sleep and you suffer less side effects from that. That would be like if you were to do a gene therapy, then you could sell that to like CEOs.
Well, because that's just interesting too, right? Like one of my friends, I don't know if he has a super sleeper gene, but he gets 4, maybe 5 hours, and he's totally fine on that consistently. And talking to him about it, he's like, you think it'd be great, but it's great till it's not, because I literally have 4 more hours a day every day. And it's like, I don't always just want to work for those 4 more hours. So there's a time of day, usually later into the night, it's like, it can feel kind of lonely, if that makes sense, right? Because day after day, you have so much more time in your day. Your effective day is so much longer, right? But the vast majority of people, especially people living in your time zone, your friends and family, right? Like, they're not awake with you, right? So it's kind of interesting to think like, yeah, CEOs may want that as long as they keep themselves busy during that period of time, right? Otherwise, I could see it being kind of boring / lonesome.
Yeah. I mean, the same can apply to just life extension. That if you stay alive for 300 years, but everyone else dies at 50 or 70, then maybe it gets...
Well, it reminds me of, I don't know if you're into like superheroes in comics, like the old man Logan from Wolverine, right? He has the super healing factor and like going through that, right? Like having all these separate wives and families and this and that. And you just kind of know that it's eventually going to be going away, but you're not going to be going away nearly as quickly, right? Interesting stuff to think about as technology just keeps on advancing, right? Like, how long would we really want to live, right? I think it also depends on, would we be functional, right? I think we could both agree if we were like not able to be very mobile and we're very dependent on other people, I really don't think I would want to be adding any more years onto my life, right? But if we could tack on functional years, like extend that true health span, right? Again, I think the limiting factor is how many other people that you love and care about are going to be on that journey with you.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
absolutely.
you end up either lonely or you have to start from scratch and try to make new friends with people after 100+ years of kind of being who you are, right? That's wild to think about, honestly.
Yeah. There, as you said earlier, there's so many genes, and we don't even know all of them that affect longevity. So, we won't be able to go through all of these genes in this episode. But let's say as a wrap up, what would be, so let's say people are interested in longevity. Obviously, they do their lifestyle factors right. But what are things that everyone kind of should know about their genes when it comes to longevity? Like, are there certain genes they would definitely want to test for? and how would you like approach constructing their own lifestyle with the information of their genes?
Yeah, I like to look at that not so much as, maybe not necessarily the exact genes to test for. The way my brain looks at this as a pharmacologist is looking at your genes to figure out which of these longevity supplements are right for you, right? Kind of as I mentioned, we were talking about which one we were talking about with the MAO inhibitor. I guess my point is pretty much all of these senolytics, right? Quercetin, resveratrol, like these all also slow down the breakdown of neurotransmitters. So for some people, they could help with mood. But for a lot of people, especially like the resveratrol, quercetin, they block more of the MAOA versus MAOB. I don't care how good the data looks. If I take it and I feel more fearful and anxious and don't sleep as well, right? Like I need to find something else to help support that, right? Or even methylene blue. Methylene blue can be great, but G6PD, that gene can be linked to hemolysis or red blood cell issues, and it could flip methylene blue into a pro-oxidant, right? So there's a lot of data around that. That's more so for people getting high doses of IV methylene blue for more clinical treatments. There isn't concrete data yet around the more lower biohacker level doses, but people that I've worked with that I've seen have these G6PD mutations, they're not doing mega doses, but they don't feel good on methylene blue. It can be that, but that also can raise adrenaline in people, right? We can look at mutations in complex 1 and 3 of the mitochondrial electron transport chain complexes and try to figure out those are the two that methylene blue can really help with. So if 1 and 3 are genetically more sluggish, right, methylene blue may make a lot of sense for you. But on the flip side, if you have slow MAO, or if you have G6PD, methylene blue can make you excessively anxious or possibly have actual health risks for you. So that's how my brain looks at it. It's cool to go detective work and trying to find these targetable genetic mutations, but I think more so we have hundreds and thousands of verified nutraceuticals. How do we really know which ones map out for you? Like I've had so many people come to me, they're on all the senolytics, they're wired, they don't know why. They just have no idea that all these senolytics literally raise adrenaline in your body, but you're not going to read that on the bottle. You're not going to read it on the label. And a lot of the people selling it may not know that, or they might know it and not want to share that, right? Because who would want to get a supplement that can raise adrenaline? Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's bad for everyone. Some people feel really great. So not finding the magical gene, but more so, how do we understand our pharmacological tools to make sure the tools match with our genes?
Right. That's good perspective. But would it be worth it for someone to know their ApoE4 or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. That's the other one that's so tightly linked to longevity, right? Like, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's linked to so many other complications, right? And it also affects your dietary patterns as well, right? What you're putting in your body throughout your whole life. It's not just thinking, oh, I'm going to get Alzheimer's, right? It's like, why may you have an increased risk for that Alzheimer's? And what can we do today, right? It's not always about the gene therapy or the supplements or the peptides. It's which foods that we're putting into our body as well. That's the whole nutrigenomic side of things as well.
Yeah, it's just like a low-hanging fruit to get it checked. This was very interesting for me at least, and we didn't cover a lot of the topics we planned initially. We just I decided to just pivot into the longevity side of things. So we'll probably have to follow up in the future. But where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, so at Dr. Tyler Pansner, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, www.drtylerpansner.com. And I'm just really on a mission to really try to advance the genetic space and make it more palatable for people, right? Genetics can be so nebulous for people, very overwhelming. And on the flip side, really understanding how these supplements work. You know, it's not just this supplement helps with brain health. What else does it do in your body, right? The supplement space is, people love to bash big pharma, right? But it's like, at least pharma is regulated. Supplements aren't regulated. And, you know, it's, for me, it's not even so much about, is the supplement high quality or are there like additives and stuff? Don't get me wrong, that's important. But even the highest quality, perfectly pure supplements, if it doesn't line up with your genetics, you're not going to feel good on that. So trying to bring those two together. And yeah, that's exactly what I make content about. And yeah, would absolutely love to come on again. It's always love talking more about this deeper science here with you. So I appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. And I'll put the link to the first episode as well in the show notes, so people can check out on the like specific supplements that we discussed and their genetics. Well, yeah, it was great to talk with you, and I'll see you around.